morning light from 3 different suns painted the council station in colors that no human eye had ever seen before. Kang Dae-ho stood at the viewing window of his small quarters, watching alien ships arrive from across the galaxy. Each vessel was different. Some looked like living creatures with wings. Others were perfect metal spheres that seemed to bend light around them, and a few appeared to be made of pure crystal that sang as they moved through space. Today was the day humans would officially join the Galactic Council. After 2 years of meetings and tests, Earth had finally been accepted as the newest member of the galaxy's oldest government. Dae-ho felt proud, but also nervous. He was about to represent all of humanity in front of beings that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. He put on his simple black uniform, the same kind that human diplomats wore on Earth. The material was comfortable and practical, with no special decorations except for a small patch showing Earth's flag. Compared to what he had seen the other aliens wearing, it looked very plain. A soft chime told him it was time to leave. Dae-ho walked through the station's corridors, passing groups of aliens he was still learning to recognize. The Thrax moved in tight clusters, their insect-like bodies covered in bright patterns that seemed to shift and change. They made clicking sounds to each other and released smells that his translator device said were actually complex conversations. The tall, rocky-skinned Ugorth walked in groups of 12, always keeping perfect formation. They spoke in deep, rumbling voices that made the floor shake slightly. When one stopped, they all stopped. When one turned, they all turned the same way. Dae-ho had never seen one of them alone. Near the entrance to the council chambers, he saw the strangest sight yet. The Nelvani looked like walking clouds of colored gas, held together by energy fields. They moved in flowing groups, sometimes separating into smaller clouds, sometimes joining together to form one large being. Their translator voices sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. As Dae-ho approached the massive doors to the sacred chambers, he noticed something that made his stomach feel tight with worry. Every other species had brought helpers, lots of helpers. The Thrax delegation had 30 beings with them, small, quick insects that carried special containers releasing different smells. The Ugorth had their usual group of 12, but also 6 more who carried what looked like stone tablets covered in glowing symbols. The Nelvani had portable machines that seemed to help keep their gas forms stable. Even species he had never seen before brought teams of assistants, advisors, and strange devices. Dae-ho looked around. He was completely alone. "Ambassador Kang Dae-ho of Earth," a voice said behind him. He turned to see one of the council's staff members, a being that looked like a walking tree with silver bark and leaves that glowed softly. "The council speaker wishes to review your documentation before the ceremony begins." "Of course," Dae-ho replied, following the tree being to a small side room. Inside, Council Speaker Vex Prime waited. Vex Prime was old, older than human civilization, the record said. His species had helped create the Galactic Council 3,000 years ago. He had 6 large compound eyes, like an insect, but his body was more like a walking machine made of metal and crystal. When he spoke, his voice came from several places at once, creating an echo that made every word sound important. "Ambassador Dae-ho," Vex Prime began, his multiple eyes focusing on the human. "I have reviewed your species application materials. There appears to be missing information." Dae-ho felt his heart beat faster. "Missing information, honored speaker?" "Yes." "Where are your psychological support staff, your decision-making collective, your cultural guidance team?" Vex Prime gestured toward the door with one of his 4 arms. "Every species requires proper support when entering the sacred chambers. The mental pressure of representing an entire civilization is too great for any individual mind to handle safely." Through the door's window, Dae-ho could see the other delegations preparing. The Thrax Queen was surrounded by her helpers who were releasing careful combinations of chemical signals to keep her calm and focused. The Ugorth were sharing some kind of mental connection through their glowing tablets. The Nelvani had formed a single large cloud being that seemed to contain the thoughts of dozens of individuals. "Honored speaker," Dae-ho said carefully, "humans don't use support systems like that. We make decisions individually. All 6 of Vex Prime's eyes turned to stare at him. The room became very quiet. "I do not understand," the council speaker said slowly. "How does your species prevent mental breakdown when facing complex decisions? How do you avoid the madness that comes from thinking alone?" Deho realized that something he had always thought was normal was actually very strange to these aliens. Every human he knew could sit quietly and think through problems by themselves. It was so basic that no one on Earth had thought to mention it in their council application. "We just think," Deho explained, trying to find the right words. "One person can look at a problem, consider different solutions and make a choice. We've always done it that way." Vex Prime's mechanical body made soft clicking sounds, probably the equivalent of confused muttering. But the complexity, the responsibility, the weight of representing billions of lives. How can a single mind process such vastness without support? Outside, Deho could hear the other delegations discussing something in their various languages and sound patterns. The universal translator, in his ear, was having trouble keeping up with so many different conversations happening at once. "With respect, honored speaker," Deho said, "humans have been making individual decisions for thousands of years. Our greatest leaders, scientists, and artists worked alone. We sent people to explore dangerous places by themselves. We trust individual humans to make choices that affect millions of people." The council speaker was quiet for a long time. His compound eyes never left Deho's face, as if trying to see something hidden there. "This is unprecedented," Vex Prime finally said. "In 3,000 years of council operations, no species has ever requested to enter the sacred chambers without proper psychological support." "Then perhaps," Deho said with a small smile, "it's time for something new." Another long silence filled the room. Finally, Vex Prime made a sound like metal chimes ringing. "Very well, Ambassador Deho. If your species truly believes that one mind can bear such responsibility, we shall see. But understand that you will be completely alone in the chamber. No advisors, no support systems, no connection to your home world. Just you and your thoughts." Deho nodded. That's all any human has ever needed. As they walked back toward the great doors, Deho noticed how the other aliens looked at him. Some seemed worried, others curious, and a few appeared almost frightened. He was about to do something that, in their minds, was impossible. The massive doors to the sacred chambers began to open, revealing a vast space filled with soft light. Today would change everything, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to think alone. 3 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and Deho had settled into his role as Earth's representative. He had learned to navigate the complex social rules of dozens of alien species, though he still drew curious stares whenever he walked the station corridors alone. The other ambassadors had grown used to his strange human habits, but they still didn't understand them. The Thrax queen Zik Talar often asked through her chemical speakers why he didn't feel lonely without a proper support colony. The Ugorth delegation leader, stone mover of the 12th mountain, wondered how he could trust his own thoughts without the wisdom of the group mind to check them. But peaceful curiosity was about to become desperate need. The crisis started with a simple trade disagreement. The Karathi Empire, a military civilization from the galaxy's outer rim, claimed that the Merchant Confederation of Ilani worlds had been cheating them in their metal for food exchanges. The Ilani insisted they had been following all agreements, exactly as written. What began as angry messages between trading posts quickly grew into something much more dangerous. Karathi warships began patrolling near Ilani colonies. Ilani merchants refused to deliver supplies to Karathi worlds. Both sides sent urgent requests to the Galactic Council, demanding immediate action. Deho watched the situation develop from his office, reading reports that grew more worrying each day. The Karathi were proud warriors who saw any insult to their honor as reason for battle. The Ilani were practical traders who believed that breaking agreements meant losing trust forever. Neither side seemed willing to back down. Council Speaker Vex Prime called an emergency session. Representatives from 15 different species gathered in the great meeting hall, each bringing their full support teams. The Thrax Queen arrived, with 40 chemical advisors. The Ugorth came in their traditional group of 12 plus 6 more carrying ancient wisdom stones. The crystal beings called Korthari brought harmonic resonators to keep their shared thoughts in perfect tune. In total, nearly 300 beings crowded into the meeting hall, which had been built for much smaller gatherings. The air filled with competing sounds: Thrax chemical speech, Ugorth stone song, Korthari crystal chimes, and dozens of other communication methods. The universal translators struggled to keep up with so many conversations happening at once. The situation grows, more dangerous by the hour, Vex Prime announced, his multi-voice echoing over the chaos. Both the Karathi Empire and the Yalani Confederation have threatened to withdraw from galactic civilization entirely if we do not resolve their dispute immediately. A worried murmur ran through the assembled beings. No major civilization had ever left the Council. If it happened now, it might encourage other species to handle their problems through war instead of diplomacy. However, Vex Prime continued, our traditional decision-making process requires extensive consultation. Each species must return to their home worlds for cultural guidance. Support teams must analyze all possibilities. Collective minds must reach perfect agreement. This process typically requires several months. The Karathi representative, a tall being with skin like black metal and glowing red eyes, stood up. Months? His voice was like grinding stone. The Karathi do not wait months for justice. If the Council cannot act swiftly, we will seek satisfaction through more direct methods. The Yalani delegate, whose people looked like graceful plants, with flowing leaf hair, made a sound like rustling wind. The Confederation agrees. We cannot maintain trade relationships when pirates threaten our shipping lanes. If the Council moves too slowly, we must protect ourselves. Both were talking about war, though they were too polite to say it directly. Vex Prime's compound eyes turned toward Deho, who sat alone at his small table while other species filled entire sections with their support teams. Ambassador Deho, the Council speaker said slowly, your species has shown unusual decision-making capabilities. Would it be possible for a human representative to provide guidance in this matter? The hall fell silent. 300 alien beings turned to stare at the lone human sitting by himself. What kind of guidance, honored speaker? Deho asked. A binding decision, Vex Prime replied. Something that both sides would accept as final judgment. The silence stretched longer. The idea was so strange that many aliens couldn't quite understand what was being suggested. How could one being, without support systems or collective consultation, make a decision that affected entire civilizations? The Thrax Queen released a sharp chemical burst that her translators converted to words. Impossible. No single mind can comprehend the complexity of interspecies trade disputes. Stone Mover of the 12th Mountain rumbled agreement. The wisdom of the group mind is required for such weighty matters. But the Karathi representative was looking at Deho with something like interest. The human stands alone among us, he said. Perhaps that gives him clear sight that others lack. The Yalani delegate swayed gently, her leaf hair shimmering. Speed is necessary. Traditional council process is too slow for current crisis. Deho felt the weight of hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. This was far beyond anything Earth had prepared him for. When humans joined the council, everyone expected they would start with small roles and gradually take on larger responsibilities. No one had imagined they might be asked to solve a major crisis just 3 months after joining. But war between the Karathi and Yalani would affect trade routes throughout the galaxy. Millions of beings on dozens of worlds could suffer. And the traditional council process, with its need for extensive consultation and collective decision-making, really was too slow for this crisis. I would need access to all relevant documents, Deho said carefully. Trade agreements, shipping records, diplomatic correspondence, economic data for both civilizations. Of course, Vex Prime replied. But Ambassador, you understand that you would be making this decision entirely alone. No consultation with your home world, no advice from Earth's government, no support from other humans. Deho almost smiled. Every day of his life, he had made decisions by himself. What to eat, what to wear, which route to take to work, how to respond to problems. Humans did it automatically without thinking about it. The fact that this was apparently impossible for every other species in the galaxy was still hard for him to believe. "Honored speaker," he said. "That's how humans always make decisions." The Karathi representative leaned forward. "How long would you need?" Deho thought about it. Complex trade agreements, territorial disputes, economic analysis, cultural considerations. For both species, it was a lot of information to process, but not more than a human brain could handle. "Give me 6 hours," he said. A shocked sound went through the hall. Chemical releases, crystal chimes, stone song, and a dozen other expressions of surprise. 6 hours? The fastest the council had ever resolved a similar dispute was 4 months, and that had been considered amazingly quick. 6 hours? The Thrax Queen repeated through her translators. To analyze trade relationships affecting 17 billion beings across 43 star systems? Yes, Deho replied simply. Vex Prime was quiet for a long moment. Very well. The sacred chambers will be prepared for you. All documents will be provided in human-readable format. As Deho walked toward the great doors, he heard the aliens behind him discussing what he was about to attempt. Many seemed convinced it was impossible. Others appeared curious to see what would happen. A few sounded worried that the human might actually succeed. The massive doors closed behind him with a deep final sound. For the first time in council history, the sacred chambers held only one thinking mind. Deho sat down in the center of the vast room and began to read. The sacred chambers were completely silent except for the soft hum of air recycling systems. Deho sat in the center of the vast circular room, surrounded by holographic displays showing documents, charts, and data streams. The curved walls, stretched high above him, covered in symbols from every species in the council, a reminder that his decision would affect the entire galaxy. He started with the original trade agreements between the Karathi Empire and the Yilani Confederation. The documents were complex, written in multiple languages and filled with details about shipping schedules, quality standards, and payment methods. As he read, Deho began to understand why the dispute had grown so serious. The Karathi were warriors, first, and traders second. Their agreements were written like military contracts, precise, demanding, with severe penalties for any failures. They expected deliveries to arrive exactly on schedule, with materials meeting exact specifications. To them, the Alani's merchant practices looked like deliberate cheating. The Alani, on the other hand, were natural traders who had been buying and selling across the galaxy for centuries. Their agreements included flexible language about reasonable delays and acceptable quality variations, standard merchant terms that every other trading species understood. To them, the Karathi's demands seemed unreasonably strict. Both sides were right according to their own cultural understanding of business. Deho pulled up economic data for both civilizations. The Karathi Empire controlled rich mining worlds, but struggled to grow enough food for their large population. The Yilani worlds had excellent farms, but needed metals for their growing cities and space stations. They really did need each other. The problem was that they had very different ideas about how trade should work. Outside the sacred chambers, he knew that hundreds of aliens were waiting with their support teams. The Thrax Queen would be consulting, with her chemical advisors, trying to process the complex emotions and social pressures involved in the dispute. The Ugorth would be sharing the problem across their group mind, letting 12 individuals think together to find a solution. The Korthari would be using their harmonic resonators to align their crystalline thoughts into perfect harmony. All of those methods required extensive time and careful coordination. A Thrax decision needed perfect chemical balance across the entire colony group. An Ugorth choice required unanimous agreement among the 12 mind. Korthari conclusions demanded that every crystal in their collective sing the same harmonic frequency. But Deho was alone with only his own thoughts, and somehow that made everything simpler. He could hold contradictory ideas in his mind at the same time without feeling confused or conflicted. The Karathi were being unreasonably demanding, and they had legitimate complaints about delivery delays, The Ilani were following standard trade practices, and they had been careless about meeting specific deadlines. Both civilizations needed the trade relationship, and they were too proud to admit they might need to compromise. This kind of complex, contradictory thinking seemed to be impossible for the other species. Their collective decision-making systems required clear agreement and unified understanding. They couldn't move forward until everyone thought the same way about the problem. Humans, apparently, were different. Daeho spent 2 hours studying shipping records, looking for patterns in the delays and quality complaints. He found something interesting. The problems weren't random. They happened most often when Karathi and Ilani representatives met face-to-face to negotiate delivery details. He pulled up cultural analysis files for both species. The Karathi valued directness, strength, and absolute honesty. When they said something, they meant it exactly as stated. The Ilani preferred subtle communication, flexibility, and leaving room for interpretation. When they agreed to something, they expected both sides to be reasonable about the details. These differences weren't just causing trade problems. They were creating a cycle of misunderstanding that made each interaction worse than the last. The Karathi would demand exact delivery times and precise quality specifications. The Ilani would agree, thinking that reasonable people would understand that some flexibility was expected. When deliveries arrived slightly late, or materials were almost but not exactly what was specified, the Karathi saw it as dishonesty. When the Karathi complained angrily about these failures, the Ilani saw it as unreasonable aggression. Both sides were getting more frustrated with each interaction, until they had reached the point of threatening war. Daeho leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Around him, the holographic displays continued to show streams of data, trade volumes, shipping routes, economic projections, cultural reports. But he didn't need to look at them anymore. He could see the shape of the problem clearly now. Real issue wasn't cheating or broken agreements. It was that two very different species were trying to work together, without understanding how different they really were. For the next 3 hours, he worked on a solution. Not just a compromise that would end the immediate crisis, but a system that would prevent similar problems in the future. He wrote new agreements that included both Karathi precision and Ilani flexibility. He designed communication protocols that would help both species understand each other better. He created monitoring systems that would catch small problems before they became large conflicts. Most importantly, he found ways for both civilizations to gain something valuable from the new arrangement. The Karathi would get the reliable deliveries and quality standards they needed, plus access to new Ilani trading networks that could help them find other partners for future deals. The Ilani would keep their existing flexibility while gaining Karathi protection for their shipping routes and access to rare metals that only the Empire controlled. As he worked, Daeho realized he was doing something that the other species found impossible. He was thinking like a Karathi warrior when analyzing their needs, then switching to think like a Ilani merchant when considering their concerns. He could hold both perspectives in his mind simultaneously, understanding how each side saw the problem without losing track of the larger picture. When the 6 hours ended, he had a complete solution. The massive doors opened, and Daeho walked out to face the waiting crowds of aliens. Every species had their full support teams present, hundreds of beings filling the corridors outside the sacred chambers. They all turned to stare at him as he emerged. Council Speaker Vex Prime moved forward, his compound eyes reflecting the soft lighting. "Ambassador Daeho, have you reached a decision?" "Yes, honored speaker." A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. The Thrax Queen released complex chemical signals that smelled like surprise and disbelief. The Ugorth stone singers hummed in their deep, rumbling voices. Even the usually serene Korthari crystals were chiming with unusual harmonics. Daeho faced the Karathi and Ilani representatives. The Karathi Empire will retain exclusive mining rights to the disputed systems in the Kepler arm, but will share 25% of extracted profits with affected Ilani colonies as compensation for disrupted trade routes. The Karathi representative's red eyes glowed brighter, but he remained silent. The Alani Confederation will maintain exclusive access to the spiral trade routes, but will provide transportation services to Karathi worlds at cost, with guaranteed delivery schedules that meet imperial standards. The Alani delegate's leaf hair rustled, but she also waited to hear the rest. Both civilizations will establish joint research stations in the neutral space between their territories within one standard year. These stations will study improved methods of interspecies communication and trade, with all discoveries shared equally between the Empire and Confederation. Deho paused, looking at both representatives. Most importantly, all future negotiations between Karathi and Yalani, representatives will include cultural liaison officers trained to help both species understand each other's communication styles. The silence stretched for long seconds. Then the Karathi representative stepped forward. The Empire finds these terms acceptable, he said in his grinding stone voice. The Yalani delegate swayed gently. The Confederation agrees to these conditions. Another murmur ran through the crowd, but this time it sounded like amazement rather than disbelief. Vex Prime's multiple voices echoed in the corridor. In 6 hours, Ambassador Deho has resolved a crisis that threatened galactic peace. This is unprecedented in Council history. As the crowds began to disperse, species representatives talking excitedly among themselves, Deho noticed how they looked at him differently now. The curiosity was still there, but it was mixed with something else, a kind of respectful wonder. He had done something they considered impossible, and he had done it alone. News of the humans' solo decision spread across the galaxy faster than the fastest ships. Within days, alien civilizations that had never heard of Earth were requesting human arbitrators for their own disputes. The small human embassy on Council Station suddenly found itself busier than anyone had ever expected. Dr. Park Soo-jin arrived on the next transport from Earth, carrying research equipment and looking slightly overwhelmed. As Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, she had been studying other species for years, but she had never expected to be studying what made humans different from everyone else in the galaxy. It doesn't make sense, she told Deho as they sat in his office, reviewing reports from across known space. Every psychological model we developed about intelligent life suggested that complex decision-making would require group cooperation. Individual thinking was supposed to be limited to simple, immediate choices. Through the window, they could see ships arriving hourly at Council Station. Representatives from the far edge of the galaxy were coming to see the humans who could think alone. Scientists from dozens of species wanted to study human brain patterns. Even the mysterious architects who rarely left their hidden worlds had sent observers. Maybe we were wrong about what makes intelligence work, Deho suggested. Soo-jin pulled up holographic displays showing brain scans from various species. Look at these patterns. Thrax minds are designed to connect with chemical networks. They literally share thoughts through pheromone exchanges. Ugorth brains have specialized areas that only activate when connected to other Ugorth through their stone resonance system. Korthari don't even have individual brains, they're crystalline networks that think collectively. She gestured to a human brain scan floating beside the alien patterns. But human brains? We have all the thinking centers concentrated in one individual unit. We don't need external connections to function completely. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. The door opened to reveal Captain Lee Tae-min, commander of the exploration ship Soul's Pride. He looked tired but excited. Dr. Park, Ambassador Deho, he said, giving a quick bow. I've just returned from the Outer Rim surveys. You need to see my reports. He activated his own holographic display showing star maps marked with different colored symbols. We've made contact with 12 new species in the past month. Every single one of them has the same reaction when they learn about human decision-making capabilities. They can't believe it's possible. The star map zoomed in on specific systems. Here, the Zephyrani told us that their entire species makes decisions through atmospheric mixing. They literally need to breathe the same air to think together. Over here, the Nexari use quantum-linked crystals to share thoughts across their entire planet. Every species we've encountered has some form of collective consciousness. Soo-jin leaned forward, studying the data. What about their reaction to individual humans working alone? That's the strange part, Lee said. They're not just curious, they're amazed. The Cascade Builders offered us exclusive trading rights, just to have human consultants help them make faster decisions about construction projects. The Harmony Singers want humans to teach them about solo thinking, because their current method requires gathering hundreds of individuals for even simple choices. A new voice joined the conversation. Perhaps I can provide additional context. They turned to see Vex Prime entering the office, his mechanical form moving with surprising grace. The ancient council speaker rarely visited individual embassies, making his presence a significant honor. "Honored speaker," Deho said, standing to greet him. "Please remain seated," Vex Prime replied, settling his complex body into a specially designed chair. "I bring news that may interest you. The Council Science Committee has completed their preliminary analysis of human cognitive patterns." He activated a projection showing complex mathematical models. "For 3,000 years we have studied the development of intelligent life throughout the galaxy. We believed that consciousness itself required collective processing, that no single mind could handle the complexity of advanced thinking. The projection shifted to show evolutionary trees for various species. Every civilization we encountered developed some form of shared consciousness, some through chemical connections, others through harmonic resonance, quantum linking, or electromagnetic field sharing. We thought this was simply how intelligence worked." Sujin studied the data carefully. "But humans evolved differently. Indeed, your species appears to have developed what we are calling concentrated consciousness, all the thinking power that other species distribute across multiple minds contained within a single individual." Lee whistled softly. "So we're not just different, we're unique in the entire galaxy?" "As far as we know, yes," Vex Prime confirmed. "But the implications go beyond mere uniqueness. Your individual thinking capability explains many human achievements that other species find puzzling." He showed them records from Earth's history, scientific discoveries, artistic creations, exploration missions, technological innovations. Time and again, humans have succeeded in situations where collective consciousness species would struggle. Solo space missions, individual scientific research, single-person artistic vision, lone leaders making crucial decisions. Deho thought about his own experience in the sacred chambers. Other species can't do that? They literally cannot comprehend it, Vex Prime explained. A Thrax attempting to make decisions without chemical colony support would experience something similar to what you might call madness. An Ugorth separated from the group mind becomes unable to process complex information. For them, thinking alone is not just difficult, it's psychologically impossible. Sujin was reviewing the evolutionary data. This explains why First Contact was so confusing for everyone. When aliens met humans, they kept looking for our collective consciousness system. They couldn't understand how we were thinking at all. Correct. Many species initially assumed humans were somehow defective, intelligent but lacking proper mental support systems. It took extensive study to realize that humans don't need such systems because individual human minds contain capabilities that other species require hundreds or thousands of individuals to achieve. A communication device chimed, indicating an urgent message. Lee activated it, and a hologram of another ship captain appeared. Captain Kim reporting from the Andromeda trade route, the figure said. "We've encountered a situation that requires immediate human arbitration. The Spiral Collective and the Void Dancers are in a standoff over territorial rights, and they specifically requested a human decision-maker. They said collective species take too long to reach agreements." Lee looked at Deho. "That's the fourth request this week. The seventh, actually," Vex Prime corrected. 3 more came through official council channels this morning. Sujin shook her head in amazement. 6 months ago, nobody in the galaxy had heard of humans. Now, they're requesting us to solve problems that their own governments can't handle, because we can do something they can't, Deho realized. We can think fast alone and reach decisions that satisfy multiple perspectives simultaneously. Precisely, Vex Prime agreed. Your individual consciousness allows for a type of mental flexibility that collective systems cannot match, where other species need time to coordinate hundreds of minds into agreement. Humans can hold contradictory ideas simultaneously and synthesize solutions that serve multiple interests. Another message arrived, this one from the distant Magellanic regions, then another from the galactic core. Each one was a request for human mediation or consultation. It's not sustainable, Sujin observed. There aren't enough humans to handle all these requests, and we can't train other species to think individually. Their brains literally aren't built for it. Lee was studying the star maps showing human exploration routes. But maybe we don't need to train them. Maybe we just need to be available when they need fast, flexible decision-making. A symbiotic relationship, Vex Prime suggested. Other species provide the collective wisdom, extensive knowledge, and careful deliberation that comes from shared consciousness. Humans provide rapid individual analysis and synthesis when quick decisions are needed. Deho looked out at the busy space lanes surrounding Council Station. Ships from across the galaxy were arriving daily, many specifically seeking human assistance. What had started as humanity's attempt to join galactic civilization had become something much larger. We're not just members of the Galactic Council, he said slowly. We're becoming something the galaxy has never had before, a species that can think alone when everyone else needs to think together. Sujin nodded. The question is, what do we do with this responsibility? Outside the window, another ship approached the station, this one bearing markings from a species so distant that their light had only recently reached Earth. They, too, had come seeking the mysterious humans who could make decisions by themselves. The galaxy was waiting to see what humans would do next. 1 year after humanity joined the Galactic Council, the ancient halls buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt for centuries. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered for a historic session, the first major change to Council protocols in 3,000 years. Yoon Ji-woo stood outside the sacred chambers, adjusting her simple blue diplomatic uniform. At 28, she was young for an ambassador, but she had already mediated 7 interspecies conflicts and helped resolve 2 major trade disputes. Like all humans, she had learned to make decisions alone, though she was only now beginning to understand how remarkable that was to the rest of the galaxy. Around her, the corridor filled with the familiar sight of alien delegations preparing for council sessions. The Thrax Queen arrived with her chemical support colony of 50 individuals, their pheromone containers releasing carefully balanced scents that would help her maintain proper mental focus. The Ugorth delegation moved in their traditional formation of 12, carrying stone tablets that allowed them to share thoughts through harmonic resonance. The crystalline Korthari sang in perfect harmony as they arranged their resonance amplifiers. The gaseous Nilvani flowed together into a single massive consciousness that filled an entire section of the corridor. Even the mysterious architects had sent representatives, their energy beings flickering between visible and invisible states. As they coordinated their collective awareness, every species brought the support systems they needed to think properly. Every species except humans. Council Speaker Vex Prime approached, his ancient mechanical form moving with deliberate ceremony. Over the past year, he had watched human ambassadors solve problems that had seemed impossible, making decisions that affected billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. Ambassador Yoon, his multi-voice resonated through the universal translators. Today marks a significant moment in galactic history. Yes, honored speaker, I understand the Council is formally recognizing human decision-making capabilities. More than that, we are changing the fundamental laws that have governed Council operations since its founding. Through the great windows, Ji-woo could see ships from across the galaxy. Many bore the markings of civilizations that had specifically requested human mediation in recent months. The Spiral Collective had asked humans to help restructure their entire government system. The Void Dancers wanted human consultants to design faster communication networks. Even the proud Korathi Empire now included humans in their military planning councils. Resolution 3247A, Vex Prime announced as they walked toward the sacred chambers, will formally acknowledge that humans possess unique individual consciousness capabilities. For the first time in Council history, one species will be granted special privileges based on their cognitive differences. The massive doors began to open, revealing the vast circular chamber within. As they had for 3 millennia, Representatives from every major civilization were taking their places, surrounded by their necessary support systems. The air filled with the sounds of collective consciousness at work, chemical signals, harmonic resonances, quantum field fluctuations, and dozens of other forms of shared thinking. But in the center of the chamber, a single chair waited, empty and alone. Jiwoo walked past hundreds of aliens, many of whom had traveled across the galaxy specifically to witness this moment. She nodded to familiar faces. The Thrax Queen, who had first been puzzled by human independence, the Ugorth, stone mover who still couldn't understand how one mind could bear such responsibility, the Nelvani collective that had initially assumed humans were somehow mentally damaged. As she took her seat in the central chair, the chamber gradually fell, silent. 300 different forms of collective consciousness turned their attention to the single human, sitting alone in their midst. Vex Prime's voice echoed through the vast space. Council members, we gather today to address a situation unprecedented in our 3,000-year history. The species known as humans has demonstrated cognitive capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of consciousness itself. Holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing data from the past year. Human ambassadors resolving conflicts in hours that had taken other species months to analyze. Human mediators finding solutions that satisfied multiple civilizations simultaneously. Human consultants helping alien governments restructure their decision-making processes for greater efficiency. The evidence is overwhelming, Vex Prime continued. Humans possess what our scientists term concentrated individual consciousness, the ability to perform complex analysis, hold contradictory concepts simultaneously, and reach sophisticated decisions without collective support systems. A sound, like wind through crystal, came from the Korthari section, their equivalent of amazed agreement. The Thrax released pheromone bursts that translated as wonder and respect. Even the usually silent architects flickered in patterns that suggested deep interest. Therefore, Vex Prime announced, the Council will now vote on Resolution 3.47a. Whereas the species-designated human has demonstrated unique individual consciousness capabilities, and whereas said capabilities have proven beneficial to galactic peace and progress, let it be formally recognized that humans, and humans alone, may enter the sacred chambers without escorts, advisors, or collective support systems. The voting process began. Unlike human democracy with simple yes or no ballots, galactic voting required each species to reach consensus within their collective consciousness before casting their decision. The Thrax Queen consulted with her chemical colony, processing complex social and economic implications through pheromone exchanges. The Ugorth shared the decision across their 12 mind, ensuring unanimous agreement. The Korthari aligned their harmonic frequencies until every crystal sang the same note. One by one, species announced their votes. Each one was unanimous approval. When the final vote was recorded, Vex Prime's multiple voices rang through the chamber with formal authority. Resolution 3.247a is hereby adopted by unanimous consent. Let the record show that on this date, the Galactic Council formally recognizes human individual consciousness as a unique and valuable capability, deserving of special accommodation. A sound like celebration filled the chamber. Not applause as humans would understand it, but hundreds of different expressions of approval from species across the galaxy. Ambassador Yoon, Vex Prime addressed her directly. You are now faced with the latest challenge requiring human decision-making skills. Long-range sensors have detected artificial signals from beyond the galactic rim, evidence of a previously unknown civilization attempting to make contact. Jiwoo felt a familiar tingle of anticipation. First contact situations were incredibly complex, requiring rapid analysis of incomplete information and decisions that could affect the future of galactic civilization. Traditional council protocols would require months of collective consultation, committee reviews, and careful consensus building. What is the time frame for response, honored speaker? Our xenoarchaeology specialists estimate that delay in responding might cause the unknown civilization to assume we are hostile or uninterested. A response should be sent within days, not months. Around the chamber, alien representatives were already discussing the complexity of the situation through their various collective consciousness methods. Jiwoo could see the beginning of the slow, careful process that other species needed for difficult decisions. But she was human. She could think alone. "How long do you need, Ambassador?" Vex Prime asked. Jiwoo considered what she knew about first: contact protocols, xenopsychology, communication theory, and diplomatic precedent. It was a lot of information to process, but no more than a human mind could handle. "Give me 4 hours," she said. The familiar sound of alien amazement rippled through the chamber. After a year of watching humans work, they still found it incredible that one mind could tackle such complexity so quickly. As the great doors closed behind her, leaving Jiwoo alone in the sacred chambers, she smiled. Outside, hundreds of beings were struggling with the concept that one individual could make decisions affecting the entire galaxy. They couldn't understand how any creature could bear such responsibility without the support of collective consciousness. But humans had always been comfortable with something the rest of the galaxy found impossible to comprehend: the power and burden of thinking alone. She settled into her chair and began analyzing the mysterious signals from beyond the rim. Somewhere out there, a new civilization was trying to communicate with the galaxy. It would be her job, her individual human responsibility, to decide how the Galactic Council should respond. For the first time in galactic history, the most important decisions were being made by creatures who needed nothing more than their own thoughts to change the course of civilization. The age of human decision-making had officially begun. Jiwoo opened the first data file and started to think, alone as humans always had, as they always would. In the vast silence of the sacred chambers, one human mind began the work that would determine the future of 2 galaxies. Outside, collective consciousnesses across hundreds of species waited to see what impossible thing the humans would accomplish next. The galaxy had learned to trust the species that walked alone.